Thank you to the Living Planet Working Group for having myself, Martha Williams, and my partner, John Silipodi, to this gathering today to talk about Shift the Conversation, Navigating Charged Environments, conversation lab that we are launching for changemakers that starts February 25th. And thank you especially to the board members, Jan, Liz, and Sierra for your support. So today our intention is to tell you a little bit about the conversation lab coming up, as well as to give you a sense of what we do at Break Bread World beyond Break Bread. And so with that, let me just give you a little bit of a sense of who I am and who John is. So I am a longtime student of transformation. Um, I am a certified co-active coach and facilitator. I'm a culture maker. And I am an award-winning filmmaker and a choreographer. And I have a BA in anthropology from George Washington University, where I played Division I basketball. And I also have an MFA from film directing from the California Institute for the Arts in film directing. Um, John got his foray into the art of listening through jazz. And after his music career, he moved to entrepreneurship and became a business owner. First, he had a record label in the 90s, and then he moved to have a digital technology company where when he raised his kids. He's a 20-year practitioner of non-dual healing, men's work facilitation, and he's a certified soulful facilitator. He studied at Wesleyan University and has a BA from the New England Conservatory. So with that, we'd love to get started on a presentation. I will tell you a little bit more about Break Bread World, and then John will pop in to talk about the ecosystem of conversation. So Break Bread World is named after our flagship process, Break Bread. And Break Bread is an intimate conversation over a shared meal. Um, we have a conversation around one single carefully crafted prompt that is related to whatever organization or community we're working with. It's a carefully woven container facilitated by our trained conversation keepers. It is a trust building program that shifts the conversation and over time builds cultures of care and respect for communities and organizations. But Break Bread World offers so much more than the Break Bread process. We've developed an approach to conversation that invites people to have more awareness and agency in their conversations. And we work with conversation because we believe small shifts in conversation can have the power to shift relationships and thus shift the world around us. Consider someone who is typically apologetic, who stops apologizing, or someone who has all the answers and starts to listen. We think of conversation and shifting the conversation as a trim tab on an ocean liner. A small shift begins to turn the huge vessel of culture. Bucky Fuller uses this analogy of the trim tab. So on the rudder of a huge vessel, it takes an incredible amount of energy to turn an ocean liner, right? But if you open up this little trim tab on the side, it starts to incrementally change the direction of the ocean liner. And that's what shifts in the conversation can do. And the quickest way to shift the conversation is to shift how you gather. How you gather sets the stage for new conversations to emerge. Imagine a Zoom meeting where people come in late, aren't present, there's no intention, right? It's a very different thing than when there is organization, there's buy-in, there is intention. So what we do, as you can see, is so much more than break bread. For organizations, we also do conversation labs, conversation coaching and training for teams and leaders. And we also do consulting in the areas of communication and culture. So we are launching Shift the Conversation in February. It's a program for change makers. It's Shift the Conversation, Navigating Charged Environments. And that's what we want reflection here on today. This will be an experiential, generative conversation learning lab with a limit of 25 people, and will culminate in an in-person meeting in the fall, and perhaps even a group-led discussion at the SVN convening, Social Venture Network, for those who don't know what that is. And we are offering a significant discount to Living Planet Working Group and members of SVN, Social Venture Network. We'd like to also talk with Investor Circle and Impact Entrepreneurs and B-Lab. So we'll see if we can connect with these really powerful organizations and to their constituency. And the discounted price for this upcoming lab is $200 for these 4 sessions for the Living Planet Working Group members and SVN. Otherwise, it's $250. And the reason we're bringing this to you here today is because the idea for this series was seeded here at the Living Planet Working Group. It started with a conversation you all had, which was, how do you talk about sustainability with others? Which leads to the question, how do you talk about anything where there are strong feelings? So Janet Morgan came to us and said, hey, what about leading a session around this topic? And my response was, well, I don't think we'll get that far in just one session. And this is where the idea for the Conversation Lab was born. What if we had a series of conversations, you met with people in between, and it was a mix of a little bit of presentation and learning and then practice. And the reason why we needed this time is because conversation is loaded with complexity. It's loaded with power dynamics. People have different worldviews, personal limitations. It's a reflection of the culture that's present for the group that you're in. Is there trust? Is there respect? What are the cultural norms inside of your group? So, and we believe that the arc of our relationships are defined by a series of conversations. So you can imagine it this way, right? That the conversation you were having with your mother when you were 10 is very different than the conversation you're having with your mother in midlife. And so we believe this sort of like the practice of shifting the conversation is really what we're giving people the opportunity to do and experience and learn. So our starting point for this conversation lab is, what do you do in the face of difficult and challenging conversations? How do you show up more, be more receptive, and contribute more? And how do we learn to generatively think together, where 1 + 1 is greater than 2? How do we create conversations capable of transforming our relationships in the world we live in? We like to say that all the technology, legislation, and money in the world cannot begin to solve our most pressing global problems without genuine supportive communication capable of bridging conflict and division across the weave of our common humanity. We see conversation as a profoundly fundamental, yet often overlooked human technology. And our theory of change revolves around helping people and organizations use this technology more effectively. We start by seeing conversation through the metaphor of an ecosystem. So inside of the ecosystem of conversation is the whatever you put in there, right? It's your propensity, your personality, it's your personal history, it's the way you've been taught to have conversation, it's the culture of the groups that you are a part of, it's the tribes you're a part of, it's about power dynamics, status. It really is the expression of so much of who we are. And it's so much more than the words that we say. It's an embodied experience. That often the embodied aspect often gets overlooked, and the sort of the wide-reaching system of conversation often gets overlooked, and that's what we are working with in the work that we do. And I'm going to hand it over to John, who's going to talk a little bit more about the ecosystem of conversation. And yeah. John?
We live in a culture that there's an abundance of content and a scarcity of context. We see this in social media as an example. And the big problem is when we focus on the content only, we miss out on the relationship, on the richness, and on the depth. It's like being in the jungle and knowing the names of all the plants and the animals in that jungle, but being unable to understand the relationships. So it would be like when you see two identical looking plants, context would be knowing that if the plant is growing on a hill, it's nutritious. And if it's growing in water, it's poisonous. And likewise, in conversation, when we're too focused on content, when we're only interested in getting our point across, we're less effective than when we pay attention to the larger ecosystem. There's simply less dimension and less relationality. Some of this is about knowing yourself because you're part of the ecosystem. We have our own ways of doing conversation, habits and patterns that we've learned since we were children. Things like, do you tend to talk more or do you listen more? And why? Or what happens when you feel judged? Or what's going on when you start being judgmental? And when you feel afraid or uncomfortable, what happens in your body? And with all of these and this type of thing, the more you know about what's going on in here, the more you can learn to respond more effectively and less reactively. We expand our go-to default conversation modalities, habits, and that fills out the ecosystem. And we begin to move towards more generative, alive conversations that are more rewarding and more fulfilling for everybody. So we not only work with these personal habits, but also broader concepts that are especially important in working with difficult conversations. 3 examples of some of the concepts that we like to work with, and these are just 3 of many. When we work with people, we might work with liberating the righteous mind, asking better questions, or slowing down. Liberating the righteous mind, that's like we often tend to think in terms of right, wrong, binary, right, wrong, good, bad, us, them, life, death. This limits us, limits and constricts the conversation, our relationships. We work with how do we move beyond that binary thinking with more options, the ability to make better choices. And then there's better questions. You know, we love answers. And because when we have the answer, we can get to fixing the problem. There's a classic scene in a Pink Panther movie, long time ago. Inspector Clouseau walks up to a little old man, and next to the little old man is a wiry little dog. And Clouseau asks the man, he's French, so pardon my French, he says, "Excuse me, does your dog bite?" Little old man looks at Clouseau and says, "No." Clouseau goes to pet the dog bites him. Clouseau says, "I thought your dog doesn't bite." And the little old man says, "That is not my dog." Clouseau's not asking the right questions. The answers are only as good as the questions that we ask. And also, if the answers don't generate more questions, they might not be the best answers. And lastly, I mentioned slowing down. We live in a hyper fast world. Technology is sped up, digital bits and bytes are flying through the air, literally at the speed of light. That's not a human speed. Philosopher Bayo Akomolafe says, "The times are urgent. Let us slow down." and we really focus on this. Susan mentioned this earlier. The most important things in life, things like respect and care and nurturance, appreciation and gratitude, are relationships. They all operate at a human pace. And if we don't allow for that, if we don't slow down, we can't fully relate and connect with people. And when we slow down, it gives a chance for hearts to open. And that's when the world changes.